Hello.
Não tem muito o que fazer.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Andres Cadena from McKinsey Company. I have the privilege and the honor of guide us through this panel in which we will try to summarize in some minutes 100 years of history. And let me just start by thanking Susan and the Council for getting us all here and having the opportunity to talk about the long-term perspective, which I think is quite relevant. With today's volatility in the world, and we can argue that it is probably the moment with more volatility that we have lived through our lives, it is important not only to think about the short term, but it's very important to think about the long term and have a long-term perspective. And we're going to talk about long term, let's talk about 100 years. We can talk about what could be happening in 100 years, but it's good and worth to think about what has happened on the past 100 years. And we have lived through a lot of changes in Latin America over the past 100 years. We were about to get into a big recession in the world that was going to hit Latin, that was growing extremely well. Then we went through the war, and the war brought many things to Latin, not only growth, but also a lot of challenges. We became a urban continent from being a rural continent. Then we went through many years of relatively good stability on economics, but also a lot of movements on the political side. We had military governments, then we transitioned to democracy. Over that period, we had closed economies, then we opened the economy. We embraced the technologies, we embraced the new century. Now we're about to get into probably the most significant change in terms of technology in the world that is going to hit us all. And throughout all those years, all this century, many, many things have changed. But something that has not necessarily changed or that has prevailed are some of the most important companies that 100 years ago were still here. Companies that have survived through all this volatility, that have been able, through all this process, not only to thrive through the different risks, but to grow, to get a legacy, to leave a legacy, and to expand. So we're talking about some of the best companies in the region today that have been able to be for 100 years and to become multi-Latinas at the same time. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to talk to you today about those very important situations. And let me start just by asking a very, very simple question about if we go back 100 years ago, when some of the best companies started, what was that type of vision? What was the legacy, and what happened that you resemble in the story of your companies that was so amazing? And what were the elements that you think that have brought you 100 years later to become as successful as you have become, and with all the possibilities that you have opened through these 100 years? So, Roberto, if you don't mind, we'll start just in order, asking you about that experience in Guatemala and what happened, and what were the main sources of growth that became so important in your case.
Sure. Good morning. It's great to be here. Castillo Hermanos was founded by two young entrepreneurs in Guatemala in 1886. And as most young entrepreneurs start, they ventured into many businesses. Eventually, they decided to enter the beer industry. And believe it or not, at the time, the industry was dominated by craft brewers. So we're back to where we were over 100 years ago. And this was in 1886. And they decided to build the first industrial brewery and to produce the best beer in the world. And for this, they went to Germany and tried to find the best technology available, the best ingredients to produce the best beer, and the best talent. So they went and brought the best brewmasters from Germany to Guatemala. And they started with this dream. And as many entrepreneurs, they encountered several difficulties back then. But I joined the company 22 years ago, and three things struck me when I joined the company. They immediately surprised me because there are not elements that are common in every business. And not only do I live by them today, and they're part of my everyday life, but I think they are key to the company's success in over 139 years. The first one is when I joined the company, I realized employees or collaborators, as we like to refer to them, are considered a part of the family. So by being a part of the family, obviously we take care of them, but we also set a high bar, high standard as we would with our family members. The second one is they started this company with the vision of a shared value. So they weren't only concerned about building a business, they were concerned about generating opportunity to employees, to suppliers, growing with their customers, and also sharing and building better communities around improving the communities around the operations, the areas where they started the company. And this remains today. We live by this every day. And the third aspect is, they never sacrificed the long-term success of the company to achieve short-term results. And this is also something that is key. The company in 139 years has gone over several crises, depressions, wars, more than one pandemic. And they always had this vision of, these things will pass, these challenges will pass, and the company has to remain strong and has to find opportunities, these crises. That's when companies can leap into the future and take advantages of situations where sometimes companies pull back. So something key to this was to be very conservative on leverage. So the company has never believed in debt in the long term. Because obviously when you face a crisis and you have leverage, well, it makes it very difficult to not only face the crisis, but also take opportunity from the crisis. So I would say that summarizes some of the aspects that I believe are different from other companies. I came from New York. Imagine that's where results are pretty much what matters, and that's it. Now we have to balance a lot of things all the time, on top of uncertainty, of course. But this is what helps a company thrive over the long term, in our experience.
Thank you. Francis, you come from Chile, from a company, also a centennial company that has been not only extremely successful in your country, but also become one of the most important ones in your industry globally. What is behind CMPC? How did it start, and what is the story behind that?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you, Susan, Maria Lourdes, and Andres. Well, first of all, I would say that taking into account what happened at the beginning, our company, CMPC, was founded in the year 1920. At that time, Chile, of course, was a kind of a very poor country, and it was founded in a rural area. And I also want to remark what happened at that time, and it has to be with social, economic vision of the founders. Very much involved with the community. They were really interested in the progress of the community with an important social vocation. And it means that they understood at that time if they wanted to be really successful with their business, they need to, as you said, to work on a shared value model. And so they were really involved in educating people. For instance, they had the interest in teaching people how to write, how to read at that time, some of the people. And so very much involved in education at the beginning. So I fully believe that there are many ventures that fail because of business selfishness, and this is just the opposite. It was really important for them. And also, I would remark that the family has been, during the whole period, very much involved, very hands-on in several aspects, especially in things that has to do with the development of the country, of Chile. At that time, they were really interested in Chile, love for Chile, and so in that sense, involved in many public policies or interested in the development of the country. And it's also, I would say, an important, raw material for what would happen then with the rest of the investment in the rest of the countries where we're participating now. The other thing I would say is very important, and it has to be with the interest in scalability. From the beginning, the investor, the family that controls the company was interested in scalability. So it meant that to scale some business, Chile was not enough. So they started seeing the rest of the world for investing, for having operation in other countries, also for exports. And so we today are a company that exports to many, many countries in the world, more than 50 countries in the world. And it has also to be with this way of thinking about scalability. Innovation has been always part of important definition in the company. I would say the excellence in the operations also, and competitiveness. I would say also another important aspect. And always a view of a long-term view, I would say long-term view. So when we go to a country, to invest in a country, probably has to be with our, we are a forest company. Every rotation of a tree is more than 20 years. So we think in a way of a long-term, very much, imposed by the founders at the time.
João, Votorantim, I mean, legacy company also, not only recognized in Brazil, but throughout the whole region as one of our top companies, being able to survive through many, many situations as well, a lot of volatility in your markets, being able to diversify a lot as well. What is the story behind, and how have you been able to be as successful for so many years?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. It's to be.
I think the mic is not
the
working.
mic. Yeah, better now.
Yeah.
So great to be here. With these young companies that are still thriving. I was talking to Roberto before, and Votorantim at 105, it feels young compared to Castillo Hermanos. But the journey is long. I think with a century of history, there's so many lessons that we can take from there. As I think about the story of Votorantim, there's a couple of points in time that are relevant that I think resonate when I talk to other people. One is Votorantim was founded in 1918. The founder was a Portuguese immigrant that bought a textile business out of bankruptcy. In the middle of the Spanish flu pandemic, which I went back in time for this session and I was trying to read some news from 1918, and the description was that the pandemic caused chaos in our lives, in public services. It shut down schools, it shut down factories. So what a time to start a business, right? Especially buying something out of bankruptcy. Which shows that the value of courage has always been inside the company. So we like to think that we're courageous people because we continue to invest in the business, and I think that's required to succeed in the region. The other, I think, point in time that has always resonated with me was so Votorantim is owned by a family in the 5th generation now. There's this a letter that is very famous inside Votorantim, which was sent by a senator, which was the 2nd generation of Votorantim in the 60s, to the 3rd generation as he was preparing to transfer management of the companies into the next generation. And the letter says basically two things, which I think are still valid to this day. One was that he said, my sons, you should always have a diversified portfolio. Brazil is complicated. It's volatile. It's uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. So always have a diversified portfolio because we want this company to continue to thrive. And that has been a mantra for us ever since. Our portfolio Votorantim, our history runs in parallel to the industrialization history of Brazil. But our portfolio is very different today than it was back then. We can 12 companies. We continue to be very diversified. It works well for us. I don't know if it works for everybody, but it does for us. And the second thing that this letter says is that we've been blessed with success in business and in life. So always be generous and give back to society and do philanthropy. And generosity is something that runs inside the company, and you can see that in the employees, in the voluntary activities, in the engagement that we do. I also think those things continue to be very valuable for us today. So, we're always going to run a very diversified portfolio. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We need to adapt. But at the same time, some things are permanent. Generosity, for example, has to be a permanent feature for us. I mean, it moves our people into, and that alongside courage, I think, allows Votorantim to continue to thrive.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Percy, Itaú is a lighthouse for many, many reasons, certainly within the banking industry. Every other bank in Latin looks at Itaú and says, wow, what you have been able to do through all these years. But there's something that is, out of everything that you have done right, something that is quite remarkable is the ability to not only growth and preserve what you're doing in Brazil, but also expand and become now a very important private bank and a bank in general in the US. Needless to say what comes in the next years. Could you just go through a little bit of your thoughts on how you have been able to achieve that in Brazil and as well as internationally?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to represent Itaú. It's actually the newcomer of the Centennial Club. We became a Centennial company last year. We were founded, if we look back, Itaú is a collective of mergers throughout the years. So we were founded in 1924 at Unibanco. Itaú was founded later on with a clear purpose of bringing financial ability for people to banking. And it's very interesting, and I'll go to Itaú's story in a little bit and some of the details that make us a Centennial Club, which is very hard for a Latin American company, especially so a company in the banking sector, which is a service sector. But it's very interesting. I hear my colleagues here in the panel speaking, and a lot of the common traits of a Centennial company I see regardless of the business we are running, which is a very strong culture, a very strong adaptability of times, and resilience. Because we are in Latin America, things change very fast. So we need to be resilient, we need to have a strong culture, and we need to adapt all the time. So I think Itaú has that as well. So we're founded in 1924 with the intent of bringing finance to people. I think back in the day it was interesting that you had to go, if you had a banking account in a branch, you only could borrow money or lend money in that specific branch. So that shows the inclusion of finance was something very, very reduced in Latin America. Throughout the years, we end up growing by using a couple of principal fundamentals that we keep on today. The growth has to be sustainable, so you need to be ambitious, however, you need to be prudent. It's not about growing at any speed without the prudence. You need to have a very strong culture. You need to be ahead of your time when it comes to technology, and you need to adapt and bring services looking for a customer experience first and foremost. So if you look at our history, and then you can go throughout the times, adaptability has been what was the main focus for us and what brought us to what we are. And the other part of this business, as you alluded to, is we started as being the largest Brazilian private-owned bank to become the largest Latin American private-owned bank. So geographic diversification is also key for us because the needs on the financial sector in Latin America, they're very similar at core. So we understand and we believe that we have the ability to provide services. So The values are very similar to our colleagues here. We have adapted over time, and more than anyone, financial industry has been faced with a lot of challenges when it comes like to newcomers that are born very native digital and so on and so forth. And I think we have done tremendous transformation from a cultural perspective in order to bring a legacy bank into the modern times. So that would be, in a very, very brief, our history, but more than the history, what made us become a centennial company.
Thank you. It's interesting. I was noticing that these companies are not only centennial companies and very successful companies, but they have had the ability to go through all these changes and maintain a lot of values that come from families. They are family-owned companies that are probably on the third, fourth, fifth generation of leaders, professional as well as shareholders, that continue to have a long-term vision throughout all these years. Roberto, how has been able you and your family and the whole company to keep that legacy and the values and the vision for so many years, several generations of leaders, professional leaders, family leaders that have been able to align themselves for so many years?
Good question, Andres. And in our case, we're a family company that still is where the family is still involved in management. So that is not typical anymore. We have a board that has majority shareholders, and we have, including myself, 32 executives working in the company in the different businesses. The group diversified from beer onto non-alcoholic beverages, food products, packaging, real estate, and retail. And from generation to generation, we ensure that whoever will become a leader in the company, family or non-family, because obviously right now it's a completely professional company and it's completely meritocratic, that the person can live the values and can continue with the founder's values, both in crises or tough situations where they'll be put a test, and also in assessing opportunities. So regardless of what the company is facing in terms of challenges or opportunities, we have to make sure that the leader of business division or that has a specific function in the company has clarity and lives by those values. So I can only imagine how challenging it is for the board to select, whoever is next. We have to ensure that the leaders of the company are working for the next generations, right? So we're not working for us, we're working for our successors, for whoever is going to be in our shoes 10, 20, 30, 100 years from now. If we find that is not present in a leader, we need to change that leader. And we need to have clarity on how we set objectives, how we set incentives, so that the system is aligned and there is clarity on what we can do, how we can do it. And we usually have to go back and think, what would the founders have done in this situation, with this opportunity? And we haven't only faced challenges this way, but we have also assessed opportunities, trying to go back and thinking, is this the right opportunity? And when we assess an opportunity, we look at the people, we look at the culture, we look at their values. And if there is no match, it's not the right opportunity for us. So we continue to focus on a human-centric culture so that these values will endure and travel over time. These values still are timeless. Regarding, all this volatility we're living through, they just remain as strong as they were when the founders started the company.
Interesting, thank you. Francisco, in the case of CMPC, even though the family is still very involved in the boards and everything, they have decided to have a professional management running the company for years. But what has been common throughout the different areas of being a family-owned company run by family, now by professional management? What are those values and that legacy that you think had been fundamental to be for 100 years and to continue in the future?
Well, I would say that for continuing with the founders, with the idea, with the original idea, we as a company, I think we have worked very strongly in a purpose, and we have been revisiting the purpose, and also, there are some very concrete values that has to be with the courage, with integrity, with collaboration, with respect. I would say that this is very much important in the company. It's very important in the company. The other thing has been important is that I would say the controlling family, the Mate family, which is controlling the CMPC since many years, it's also very interested in succession, in preparing people for the next step. And in that sense, I would say that we have had a kind of a continuous policy about people growing in the company, within the company, with opportunities, but also, I would say, open to the best professional sometimes in the market. The other thing is important, I would say, is that our company, as I said before, has grown through investment mainly in Latin America with operations. We have operations in 12 different countries. We export to more than 50 countries, as I said before. But when we enter a country, we invest in a country, we are really concerned, or we dedicate too much time to understand the local culture. We're not necessarily exporting the Chilean culture to the country. We try to respect the local culture. We are really involved in the country when we invest there. And we also work with people, with local people, has been also, I would say, a very important definition for us. And also, I said before, scalability, competitiveness, and excellence in our operations, very close to the clients. We, as probably 7 years ago, we revisited, we did kind of a change in the strategy of the company. We defined 5 different pillars. One is sustainability, growth and innovation, client, competitiveness, and talent. And we have been very focused in working in each of them with KPIs and following them in every board meeting where I would say the controlling family is still very much present.
João, you were saying something that among the key success factors for Votorantim throughout 100 years, some of them are that desire or obsession, even I would say, to scale the business, to grow faster, to grow bigger, and at the same time to diversify your portfolio and make sure that you adapt better. And it takes a lot of courage in your industry. It's a lot of investment that you have to do in order to become scalable in the business. What have been like the most important moments in which Votorantim has gone through that, and how you have been taking decisions, making decisions to scale up at that level and to diversify in 12 different businesses throughout this 100-year history?
Yeah, one I think very interesting aspect of your question is how do we make decisions, right? Votorantim is a private company, wholly owned by a single family in the 5th generation. So as you can imagine, in the 5th generation, there's a lot of people, right?
100 people.
Yeah. And I think the family has been wise over time to focus a lot on governance and how decisions are made. And especially with the separation of family matters from the ownership to the management. And not mixing those things. I mean, having separate, places for those things to be discussed. And evolving the governance to adapt it to what is required of the business. So I'll give you a couple of examples on that. In the early 2000s, the 3rd generation stepped out of the business, and the 4th generation who stepped in had to make a decision to also step out of the executive functions. And they all moved to the board. So Votorantim has been professionally managed for about 25 years now, with the shareholders sitting at the board, obviously very engaged at the board, and with a selection process for board members that values meritocracy within the pool of family members that is available for that. But again, very much meritocracy driven, even inside the family. In that process, when they stepped out of the executive functions, Votorantim at that point was very decentralized because each of the family members was managing one of the businesses. They had to concentrate everything, create a center, which is the holding company we have today, centralize corporate functions, shared services, integrate everything. And we would run Votorantim at that point as a conglomerate. Well, fast forward, years, and in 2013 through 2014, I think we made a decision that model where we centralized everything for the complexity of the portfolio that we had was no longer viable. And we decided to decentralize then the decision-making again. Each company has its own management team. Each company has its own board. The boards are comprised of executives from Votorantim, from my team. The board is comprised from members of the family, or board members at the companies as well, and independent board members. So they run autonomously, and the center became more of an investment company. It was a big change in terms of how we make decisions to account for the fact that the centralization we had created before was no longer working for the types of challenges we were having, and especially being generational investors, as we thought about what the fifth generation would look like. Right? Because the fifth generation was going to be, in our case, the first generation that had not worked at the business. So obviously they had very different views, very different needs, different opinions, and how do you channel that into strategy required us to adapt again. I think we've been successful. The transition, the generational transition is taking place right now very smoothly behind the scenes, while our companies are working autonomously, and that has been very successful for us. That has allowed us to sort of reposition Votorantim from what we were always called a conglomerate into an investment company. Today we define Votorantim as a permanently capitalized investment company with a long-term approach that seeks superior financial returns and wants to have positive social and environmental impact. That's what we are today. So we managed to sort of change the business model, change how we operate at the center, change how the companies operate to try and be current to both what the shareholders want as well as what the business requires for us to be successful.
Percy, in the case of Itaú, I think it's fair to say that one of the drivers for the company, for the families in general, has been innovation. We've been a very innovative company throughout the years, probably being ahead of the curve many times through the century, and probably that's the reason why at this moment it becomes still, a very strong platform for financial services across the whole Latin America. How a company can be able to be ahead of the curve for 100 years and be innovative enough and driving from the technology before everybody else and from the talent before everybody else. And what is the key success factor in the recipe?
It starts with trust, right? When we talk about our controlling shareholders, we're controlled by three families. And the story about how the merge between Itaú and Unibanco happened is fascinating. It happened over in a conversation of 2 hours between the two main shareholders, where they look at each other and said, I think we would be better off joining our forces instead of competing with each other. So it's a very brief meeting between them, and now they're the co-chairs of the bank. The bank has been run for roughly a decade by completely professional management, represented by our CEO, Milton Malui. And the families are not participating on the day-to-day of the bank, but on the board. So it starts with that part, that the main shareholders, they trust that the management will be looking into how to innovate. The other story that I think is fascinating is not long ago, as you guys can imagine, banks are faced with, as I said, with a lot of new companies, newcomers with different purposes that come with a much leaner infrastructure as a legacy bank like ours from several acquisitions would have. The bank had a crossroad. So it could basically recreate and run in parallel a digital bank, or it could reinvent itself from inside out. The easier one would probably be to build a new digital bank and run in parallel with a legacy one. But the bank decided to go the opposite way, to reinvent itself and become digital in a very, very heavy infrastructure. Why? The reason for that is that cultural aspect of the bank. Not necessarily what's digital today, it's going to be modern tomorrow. So if you build something new today for the current times, probably in the future, you haven't learned how to adapt yourself. You're going to have to rebuild something if time changes and necessities change. So the bank went in a different route and ended up completely changing the bank in the way we do from adaptability on technology, as you said. And we decided to re-engineer ourselves to be a more digital and more modern bank. It took us a solid 5 years to get there. A lot of tries and errors, a lot of money spent. But it's interesting, as you said, from the trust from the board of a vision that we need to be a much leaner, faster, adaptable, and attuned to what the new generations will need, not only from our current customers, but the future customers, we have been able to adapt. And it's interesting to see from the Southern Hemisphere, I'm not talking only Latin America, I'm talking Southern Hemisphere. Itaú is the largest partner from all the major technology companies in the world. In the Southern Hemisphere, we're the largest partners for Amazon, for IBM, for Microsoft, for all the companies that you can imagine. Itaú is the largest partner because we are very attuned to technology and how the world is transforming. And all it starts, as you said, from the vision of the three families that have a lot of trust amongst themselves, and they delegate that to very professional management that drives the vision forward.
Thank you. We as McKinsey, we are probably the youngest here. We're having our 100th anniversary this year. We become a centennial company this year as well. And as we think about the past 100 years and the current situation, internally we have been debating what are the changes that we have to do to survive another 100 years, to become successful for another 100 years, with all the volatility, but especially the change that is going to be brought to us by the new technologies, AI and everything else. So I'd like to finish with a very short question and answer, because we'll have 2 minutes for each of you on the next 100 years, which is, I mean, if you think about what would imply to be 100 years of, another 100 years of success, and if you could summarize in a couple of words, what would that be to be able to inspire? Because we have here not only another large and centennial companies, but a lot of businessmen that are just starting their own companies, and they will learn a lot from that inspiration. Roberto.
We're in constantly changing times. Stick to the core values that brought you here and embrace those that will take you to the next 100 years, no matter what. It's not easy, but the path is clear.
Alex.
Hard answer, but when I would say the really flexibility in the organization, and very much focus on preparing the talent for the next 100 years. And I could say innovation and investment crucial.
Thank you, Francis. João.
So from an industrial group into a more diversified portfolio with banking, infrastructure, energy, real estate, pharma, more recently, the portfolio is changing a lot. And I expect the pace of change to continue. What I'll be looking for that is permanent in the future for us is the 3 core values that we have, which are integrity, collaboration, and courage. Those are the permanent things that, and it's our role at the center to make sure that those values stick at our companies, and with that, I think they can thrive with adapting to the challenge that they see.
Thank you. Percy.
Very quickly, I think obviously the culture, the values, they have to sustain because it's what brought you here. It's really hard to think about 100 years when you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow because technology is evolving so fast. However, I think one of the characteristics that is important for a company to keep on growing is not be afraid of making mistakes. You got to keep on trying. If you make a mistake, just regroup and go ahead, because things are going to be adaptable over the time, and you need to be fast in deploying the new technologies, deploying the new aspects of the business, however, with a core value of what brought you here.
Perhaps at a future panel we can talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
Because I think we have plenty of them with
gonna be plenty of
with
them.
100 years.
Yeah, we'll take that for the next year. Well, thank you very much. It's been a privilege to hear these stories from four of the most important leaders in the region. So join me in a big applause to all of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now welcome to the stage Caio Felipe, Chief Business and Marketing Officer of Inter.